"What do you want to do to me, rancher?" the Apache woman asked, but he acted without words. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain of the Arizona frontier. Dust rose in thin swirls from the dry ground as Samuel guided his horse along a narrow, winding trail. He had been riding for hours, the silence of the land broken only by the occasional call of a distant bird or the clatter of his horse's hooves on rocks. Samuel was a man used to solitude, someone who had spent most of his life on the open land, tending to cattle and maintaining his small ranch. Yet even he felt a strange tension in the air that evening, as though the land itself was holding its breath. As he reached a bend in the trail, Samuel's sharp eyes caught a movement near a cluster of low shrubs beside a narrow creek. At first he thought it might be a deer, but then he saw her, a young Apache woman, tall and lithe, moving carefully, her eyes scanning the area as if she could sense danger before it arrived. She paused, her dark hair falling over her shoulders, and her gaze met Samuel's. "What do you want to do to me, rancher?" she asked, her voice steady but wary. It was a question that carried both fear and strength. She was alone, far from her people, and yet she did not show panic. Samuel, trained by years of life on the frontier to read the smallest signs of threat, did not answer with words. Instead, he acted with quiet restraint. His hands remained open, resting gently on the reins of his horse. There was no sudden movement, no gesture that could be misunderstood. The woman studied him, her eyes sharp, calculating. She could see that he was different from the others she had encountered. He did not carry the aggressive stance of a man looking for a fight, nor did he wear the smug expression of someone who believed the land belonged to him alone. There was a calmness in him that was unusual, and it caught her off guard. She shifted slightly, taking a careful step back, but did not turn away. Samuel dismounted slowly, making sure each movement was deliberate. The ground crunched softly beneath his boots, but he kept his focus on her. In that moment, words seemed unnecessary. The two of them were strangers in a land that demanded respect, where survival often depended on quick thinking and quiet observation rather than speech. Samuel reached for the canteen at his belt and lifted it slightly, offering water, not in a gesture of surrender but as a sign of peace. The Apache woman hesitated. She had learned to trust little, especially when strangers appeared without warning. But something in Samuel's steady gaze, in the deliberate way he presented no weapon and made no sudden move, made her pause. Slowly, she accepted the water, her fingers brushing his briefly. The contact was fleeting, yet it carried a silent understanding. Neither meant immediate harm, and both were aware that the frontier demanded caution. They began to walk along the creek together, moving carefully, eyes alert to the surrounding wilderness. Samuel noticed the grace in her movements, the way she stepped lightly over rocks and roots, as if the ground itself guided her steps. Naeli, as she later revealed her name, observed him as well. There was a quiet strength in Samuel, a resilience that spoke of years spent facing harsh weather, wild animals, and the unforgiving nature of frontier life. The trail led them through a small canyon, its walls rising like protective arms on either side. Here, the wind whispered through cracks in the rocks, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and distant pine. Samuel pointed to a small overhang where they could rest, and Naeli nodded, accepting the suggestion without a word. As they settled down, they remained cautious, each aware of the other's presence, yet neither making a move to dominate or intimidate. Hours passed, and the sun dipped lower, turning the sky a brilliant orange and pink. Shadows stretched long across the canyon floor. The air cooled, and the sound of the creek flowing over stones became a gentle rhythm, almost meditative. Samuel and Naeli did not speak much. Words seemed unnecessary in the quiet companionship they had begun to form. Instead, they shared the small, essential acts of survival, checking their water, observing the terrain, keeping watch for predators. Naomi finally spoke again, her voice softer this time. "You are not like the others," she said, almost to herself. Samuel nodded slightly, understanding the unspoken truth behind her words. He had seen too many travelers come and go, too many who assumed that fear could command obedience. But the land, he knew, demanded more than force. It required respect, patience, and a willingness to read the unspoken language of survival. As twilight deepened, the canyon darkened and stars began to appear in the vast, open sky. Samuel built a small fire, careful to keep it controlled, while Naomi gathered dry brush for the flames. The firelight danced across their faces, highlighting the cautious yet growing trust between them. They ate simple provisions, dried meat and bread, while the quiet of the wilderness surrounded them. In that moment, they were no longer just a rancher and a lone Apache woman. They were two individuals learning to navigate the unknown together, bound not by words, but by circumstance and silent understanding. Night fell fully and the desert became alive with subtle sounds. The rustle of nocturnal animals, the whisper of the wind over the rocks, the distant call of an owl. Samuel and Naomi took turns keeping watch, each learning from the other's vigilance. It was a strange companionship, built on necessity and mutual respect, and yet it carried a sense of possibility, a hint that even in the harshest conditions, connection could emerge without words. By the time the first light of dawn touched the canyon walls, painting them in soft hues of gold and lavender, a silent agreement had formed between them. They would continue together, careful and watchful, but no longer strangers defined solely by caution or fear. The land around them remained unpredictable and wild, yet in each other they had found a measure of trust. It was a fragile bond, but one that offered hope in a world that often seemed indifferent to survival. The first part of their journey ended with the rising sun, marking the beginning of a story written not in words, but in actions, gestures, and shared understanding. Samuel and Naomi knew that challenges lay ahead, yet they also understood that the wilderness had already taught them the most important lesson, that sometimes silence and respect spoke louder than words ever could. The morning sun climbed slowly over the jagged horizon, spilling golden light across the canyon walls. Samuel and Naomi had already risen before dawn, their movements quiet so as not to disturb the fragile peace of the wilderness. The night had been cold, but the warmth of their fire and the careful preparation of their small campsite had kept them safe. As they prepared to continue their journey, there was a new understanding between them. Trust, though still tentative, had begun to grow, not through words, but through shared actions and mutual care. Samuel adjusted the saddlebags on his horse, making sure water and provisions were secure. Naomi examined the terrain ahead, her eyes scanning the distant ridges and valleys with the trained precision of someone who had grown up in the land. She moved silently, barefoot where she could, testing the ground and noting the safest paths. Samuel watched her closely, fascinated by the natural ease with which she navigated a landscape that he, despite his years on the frontier, sometimes found unforgiving. Without exchanging words, they began walking together along the creek that had led them through the canyon the previous day. Samuel kept one hand lightly on his horse's reins, ready to mount if danger approached, while Naomi moved ahead, sensing obstacles and noting subtle changes in the wind or terrain. It was a silent dance of coordination, each adapting to the other's rhythm, each learning how to anticipate and rely on the other. The creek widened into a shallow pool, its waters clear and cold. Samuel dismounted and knelt to cup water in his hands, drinking deeply before offering some to Naomi. She paused, letting him observe her cautious approach before she drank. Even in simple acts like sharing water, a new level of understanding was forming. It was a trust not spoken aloud, but felt deeply, a quiet acknowledgement that they were no longer merely strangers passing in the wilderness. As they continued along the trail, the terrain became more challenging. Loose stones and steep inclines required careful footing. Samuel relied on his experience as a rancher, remembering the paths where horses might slip or where hidden ravines could present danger. Nayeli, in contrast, moved with a natural fluidity, reading the land as if it were an extension of herself. She occasionally pointed out hidden hazards with a subtle gesture, guiding him without interrupting the silent flow of their travel. The sun climbed higher, turning the dusty path a bright, almost harsh white. Samuel paused, wiping sweat from his brow, and noticed how carefully Nayeli moved. He realized that she, too, felt the strain of the journey, though she did not complain. It was a shared endurance, a silent agreement that hardship would be faced together. He offered her a piece of bread from his bag, and this time she took it without hesitation, nodding faintly in gratitude. Their small acts of care built an unspoken bond that neither words nor fear could have created. By midday, they reached a small grove of mesquite trees. Samuel suggested they rest, and Nayeli agreed, sitting on a large flat rock while he tethered his horse to a nearby tree. The grove provided welcome shade and a chance to observe the land around them. Birds flitted among the branches, and the wind carried a mix of scents: sage, dry earth, and the faint perfume of desert flowers. Here, in this quiet oasis, Samuel felt a rare sense of peace. He watched Nayeli quietly gather dry twigs and leaves, examining the plants as if she were reading a map written in nature itself. Nayeli finally spoke, breaking the long silence. "You are careful," she said, her voice low but steady. "Most men rush forward thinking strength is enough. You are not like them." Samuel nodded, offering a small smile. He did not speak much, for words were not needed to convey his understanding. Instead, he watched her gestures, her careful movements, and recognized a kind of wisdom that could only come from years of living closely with the land. After resting and sharing a small meal, they continued their journey, moving along a narrow ridge that overlooked a sweeping valley. The view was breathtaking, a patchwork of desert, rock formations, and distant mountains fading into the horizon. Samuel pointed to a distant cluster of rocks, noting a possible path for their route, and Nayeli nodded in silent agreement. She adjusted her pace, allowing Samuel to keep up comfortably. Their partnership was becoming seamless, a blend of observation, intuition, and quiet guidance. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, clouds began to gather on the horizon. Samuel sensed the change in the air, the subtle drop in temperature, and the distant rumble of thunder. Nayeli noticed it as well, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the sky. Without speaking, they quickened their pace, seeking a safe place to shelter. The land became more rugged, with jagged stones and sudden drops. Samuel's experience told him where to step carefully, while Nayeli's knowledge of natural signs helped them avoid unstable ground. They finally found a small overhang in the rocks, a natural shelter that would protect them from the approaching storm. Samuel quickly gathered loose brush to block the wind, while Nayeli collected dry leaves and moss to make a soft resting place. As the first drops of rain fell, they settled under the overhang, watching as the storm swept across the valley below. Lightning illuminated the sky, followed by the distant roll of thunder. Despite the storm, there was a sense of safety in their shared effort. They had relied on one another to reach this place, and that reliance had begun to feel natural. The rain continued, gentle at first, then heavier, drumming on the rocks above. Samuel shared his blanket with Nayeli, and she offered him a small pouch of dried fruit. Their eyes met briefly, and in that glance there was mutual recognition of the unusual bond forming between them. They had started as strangers, each wary of the other, but necessity and shared effort had created a connection deeper than either had anticipated. Hours passed as the storm moved on, leaving the land glistening and refreshed. Sunlight broke through the clouds, casting rainbows across the valley. Samuel and Naeli emerged from their shelter, careful but relieved. The air smelled clean and new, and the world around them seemed reborn. They continued their journey, moving cautiously over wet stones and through puddles, each aware of the other's movements. By evening, they reached a small, quiet stream. Samuel dismounted to check the water and refill his canteen, while Naeli knelt to examine the area. She pointed out a shallow pool where they could rest safely without fear of slipping. The stream reflected the colors of the setting sun, turning the water into shades of gold and crimson. Samuel offered her some water, and this time, they both drank in a quiet moment of shared satisfaction. As night approached, they set up another small campsite near the stream. Samuel built a modest fire, careful to contain the flames, while Naeli arranged stones around the edge to ensure safety. The crackling fire lit their faces, revealing a mixture of fatigue and quiet contentment. They ate their modest meal in silence, but the silence was no longer tense. It was comfortable, filled with the unspoken acknowledgement of the journey they were sharing. Before sleep, Samuel and Naeli took turns keeping watch. The stars stretched across the sky, brilliant and clear, each one a distant light in the vast darkness. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of wet earth and desert plants. They spoke very little, but when they did, it was soft and meaningful. Naeli shared a story of her people, of the way the land taught lessons and how every rock and tree held a memory. Samuel listened, offering small gestures of understanding, and in those moments their connection deepened. By the time they finally rested, a quiet trust had formed between them. They had faced the heat, the storm, and the unpredictable dangers of the wilderness together. Without speaking many words, they had learned to rely on one another, to observe, to anticipate, and to protect. The bond they had formed was not of friendship alone, but of survival, respect, and understanding. It was a connection that the wild frontier had forced upon them, yet one that both silently cherished. As the night deepened, the fire's glow softened, and the sounds of the desert surrounded them. Samuel and Naeli drifted into sleep, aware that tomorrow would bring more challenges, but also aware that they no longer faced the land alone. The trust, quiet yet firm, would guide them through whatever lay ahead. And in that trust, they had found a rare companionship, one that spoke louder than words and stronger than fear. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet earth and sage from the storm that had passed during the night. Samuel and Naeli rose with the first light, feeling the quiet strength of the land around them. Their previous days together had taught them much about one another, but today, the challenges ahead promised to test their endurance and deepen their bond even further. After quickly breaking camp, Samuel led his horse to the stream to drink, while Naeli carefully observed the surrounding area. She scanned the landscape, noticing the slight incline of a ridge, the distant shadows of rocks that could hide dangers, and the tracks of small animals that crisscrossed the trail. Samuel watched her, impressed by the attention she paid to details that most men would overlook. It was clear that she had grown up in the wilderness, learning the subtle ways the land communicated with those who knew how to listen. They moved cautiously along a narrow trail that wound through rocky hills. Loose stones crunched underfoot, and Samuel had to guide his horse carefully to prevent slipping. Naeli walked ahead, moving lightly, almost floating over the uneven terrain. Every so often, she would glance back, ensuring Samuel was keeping pace, and then gesture toward safer spots for him to step. Though they did not speak often, these gestures had become a language of their own, a silent understanding that allowed them to navigate the dangers of the frontier together. By late morning, the terrain grew more difficult. The trail led up a steep incline, bordered by cliffs that dropped sharply into hidden valleys below. Samuel gritted his teeth as he carefully guided his horse upward, noting the loose stones that threatened to give way under the animal's hooves. Nayeli, with a calm confidence, ascended the same slope effortlessly, stepping only where the rock was solid. She occasionally reached out to help steady Samuel when a stone shifted beneath him, and he silently appreciated her vigilance. The heat of the day intensified, the sun blazing overhead and reflecting off the rocky surfaces, making the climb exhausting. Samuel paused frequently to wipe sweat from his brow and check the horse's condition. Nayeli, though less affected by the heat, remained attentive, pointing out patches of shade under jagged rocks where they could rest briefly. In those moments, the silence between them was not empty. It was filled with mutual respect and quiet communication, each action expressing care and attention. As they reached the summit of the ridge, the view opened up to reveal a vast valley stretching out for miles. Green patches of desert vegetation contrasted with the pale sand and rugged cliffs, and a distant river glimmered like a silver ribbon. Samuel let out a low whistle of appreciation. Nayeli smiled faintly, acknowledging the beauty of the land with a simple nod. They paused to rest, sharing small bites of food from their provisions. It was a modest meal, dried meat, bread, and a few berries, but it felt abundant after the grueling climb. Once they had regained some strength, they continued their journey, descending carefully into the valley below. The path was treacherous, with loose rocks and sudden drops that demanded constant attention. Samuel had to rely on his experience as a rancher and horseman, while Nayeli relied on her intimate knowledge of the land and its hidden patterns. Occasionally, they would come across animal tracks, and Nayeli would explain through gestures and minimal words what the tracks revealed, where the animals had gone, whether they were dangerous, and where they might find fresh water. Samuel listened intently, learning from her skills, realizing that survival in this land required knowledge beyond mere strength. Around midday, they reached a shaded area near a small grove of trees. The air was cooler here, and the gentle rustling of leaves provided a soothing contrast to the harsh sunlight. They decided to rest briefly, allowing their horses to graze while they inspected the surrounding terrain. Nayeli pointed out edible plants and roots, explaining silently which ones could be eaten safely. Samuel was careful to observe her methods, recognizing that her knowledge was both practical and deeply intuitive, born from generations of living in harmony with the land. The afternoon brought new challenges. As they moved along the valley, a herd of wild animals, deer and antelope, suddenly appeared, startled by their presence. Samuel froze, instinctively signaling his horse to stay calm, while Nayeli crouched low, blending with the shadows of rocks. The animals watched them cautiously for a moment before darting off into the distance. It was a small but powerful lesson. In the wilderness, even a brief misstep could cause panic or danger. Samuel realized that working together with Nayeli, rather than separately, increased their chances of safety and survival. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the valley, the temperature began to drop. Samuel and Nayeli sought a safe place to spend the night. They found a natural hollow beneath a cluster of rocks, elevated enough to avoid potential flooding from the creek nearby. Samuel quickly gathered dry wood while Nayeli arranged stones to build a small fire pit. Once the fire was lit, its warm glow offered comfort against the evening chill. They shared another modest meal, the firelight dancing across their faces. This time, their conversation was slightly longer, though still minimal. Nayeli told Samuel about the traditions of her people, the way they interpreted the land, and the respect they held for every living thing. Samuel listened carefully, nodding, and shared small anecdotes of his own experiences as a rancher, facing storms, wild animals, and unpredictable neighbors. Each story strengthened the quiet bond forming between them, blending wisdom, respect, and mutual understanding. Night fell fully, and the stars stretched across the sky, countless points of light in the vast darkness. Samuel took the first watch, lying near the fire with his eyes scanning the valley for any signs of danger. Naeli observed him silently, noting his alertness and the care he took with both himself and their horses. When it was her turn to watch, she moved with the stealth of someone who had spent her life attuned to the wilderness. Even in the dark, she remained aware of every sound and shadow, ensuring their safety. During the night, the wind shifted, bringing the faint scent of rain from distant mountains. Samuel and Naeli listened, their senses tuned to every nuance of the land. The bond between them had grown deeper, shaped not only by shared survival, but by the understanding that they could rely on one another completely. Words were no longer necessary for communication. A look, a gesture, or a small action conveyed volumes. As dawn approached, painting the valley in soft shades of pink and orange, Samuel and Naeli prepared to continue. They had learned much from each other during their travels, the power of observation, the importance of patience, and the strength that comes from quiet trust. Each step forward was a shared effort, a testament to the bond they had forged in the harsh, unpredictable wilderness. The journey through the valley brought new lessons. Samuel learned to watch for subtle changes in the wind that could indicate weather shifts, while Naeli learned to anticipate the behavior of the horse in difficult terrain. Together, they navigated small ravines, crossed shallow streams, and climbed gentle slopes, each action reinforcing the trust and coordination that had become essential to their survival. By midday, they reached a small plateau overlooking a larger valley below. From this vantage point, they could see the vastness of the land stretching out endlessly. Samuel paused, taking in the view, while Naeli crouched to inspect the plants and rocks, reading the land as if it held secrets meant only for those who paid attention. They shared a quiet meal here, enjoying the calm before continuing their journey into unknown territory. The afternoon brought unexpected challenges. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, and Samuel noticed subtle shifts in the wind that suggested a storm was approaching. Naeli pointed toward a distant grove of trees that could provide shelter, and without speaking, they quickened their pace. The rain began as a light drizzle, then intensified into a steady downpour, soaking their clothes and cooling the air. They moved carefully, avoiding slippery rocks and small gullies where water rushed downhill. Eventually, they reached the grove and found a natural rock overhang that would serve as a temporary shelter. Samuel quickly gathered fallen branches to block the wind, while Naeli arranged leaves and moss to create a dry area for them to rest. As the storm raged outside, they sat close to the fire, sharing warmth and protection. The rain's rhythm against the rocks was steady and comforting, a reminder of the power and unpredictability of the wilderness. As night fell, Samuel and Naeli reflected silently on the day's journey. They had faced challenges together: heat, rugged terrain, wild animals, and storms, and each trial had strengthened their connection. Their companionship was no longer based solely on necessity. It was now a quiet trust and respect born of shared experience. By the time sleep claimed them, the storm had passed, leaving the land fresh and glistening. Samuel and Naeli lay near the fire, their senses alert but at ease, knowing that the lessons of the wilderness had brought them closer and made them stronger. The bond they had formed in these harsh, beautiful surroundings would guide them through the challenges yet to come, and the silent understanding between them was now unbreakable. The morning arrived with a gentle haze hanging over the valley, the aftermath of the storm leaving. Everything damp and sparkling under the sun. Samuel and Naeli awoke early, the fire from the previous night reduced to warm embers. They had rested well, but both knew that the wilderness offered no guarantees. Every step forward demanded attention, awareness, and sometimes courage beyond what either had imagined. They quickly broke camp, gathering their supplies and checking their horses. Samuel noticed the careful way Naeli packed the provisions, each item in its place, as though she had a precise method honed by experience. Her efficiency impressed him. It reminded him that she was not just a survivor but someone who thrived in the unpredictable world around them. Samuel himself moved methodically, checking the saddlebags, securing water, and inspecting the horse for signs of fatigue. Their teamwork, once tentative and cautious, had become a seamless rhythm, a silent coordination born of necessity and trust. As they moved along the trail, the landscape shifted. The gentle slopes of the valley gave way to rugged hills, their surfaces jagged and uneven. Rocks jutted out like sharp teeth, and hidden gullies threatened to trip the unwary. Samuel led his horse carefully, while Naomi moved ahead, scanning the land for safer paths. Her sharp eyes caught subtle changes in the soil and the faint impressions of footprints left by others who had passed through. She gestured silently, indicating a more secure route, and Samuel followed without hesitation. The tranquility of the morning was suddenly interrupted by distant voices, rough and harsh, carried on the wind. Samuel stiffened, his hand instinctively moving toward the hilt of a knife at his belt. Naomi's eyes narrowed. She crouched slightly, blending with the rocks, her body low and alert. They exchanged a brief glance, a silent understanding passing between them. Danger was near, and they would need to act quickly to avoid it. As the voices grew closer, Samuel and Naomi moved with careful stealth, keeping to the shadows of the rocks. The men approaching were rough-looking, armed with rifles and knives, and their intent was clear. Samuel's experience in the wilderness told him that confrontation would be dangerous, and Naomi's instincts mirrored his caution. Without speaking, they coordinated their movements, using hand gestures and subtle signals to navigate the terrain and avoid detection. The group of men passed close to their hiding spot, unaware of their presence. Samuel's heart pounded in his chest, but he remained calm, controlling his breathing and keeping his movements minimal. Naomi, poised and silent, followed his lead, her eyes tracking every movement of the intruders. Once the danger had passed, they exhaled slowly, a quiet relief washing over them. It was a reminder of the constant vigilance required in a land where strangers could be threats, and survival demanded awareness at all times. The encounter, though brief, deepened the bond between them. They had faced danger together, relying not on weapons alone but on trust, observation, and quick thinking. Their partnership had evolved from simple caution to coordinated action, a silent teamwork that spoke louder than words ever could. Samuel realized that Naomi's presence had saved him as much as his skills had protected her, and he felt a quiet respect for her courage and intelligence. As the day wore on, they continued their journey through increasingly difficult terrain. The hills became steeper, the paths narrower, and the wind harsher. Each step required attention, each movement careful and deliberate. Samuel guided the horse while Naomi scouted ahead, pointing out hazards and suggesting safer routes. They moved slowly, but their progress was steady, driven by the determination to navigate the wilderness together. Around midday, they reached a narrow canyon, its walls towering above them and casting deep shadows across the floor. Samuel and Naomi paused to examine the area. The canyon offered protection from the wind but also presented risks: loose rocks, sudden drops, and hidden crevices. Naomi carefully tested the ground, her movements precise, while Samuel followed her lead, trusting her judgment. They found a small clearing where they could rest briefly, their horses grazing while they took stock of their surroundings. During the pause, Naomi spoke softly, her voice carrying over the quiet canyon. She told Samuel about the strategies her people used to avoid danger, to observe without being seen, and to move through the land in ways that left no trace. Samuel listened intently, absorbing the wisdom she shared. He realized that her knowledge was not just about survival, it was about respect for the land and understanding the delicate balance of life within it. He shared some of his own experiences, lessons learned from storms, predators, and encounters with other travelers. The exchange, though minimal, strengthened their connection, blending experience, respect, and mutual admiration. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, a new challenge presented itself. The canyon walls narrowed, and the trail became treacherous, with loose stones and sudden drops. Samuel guided the horse carefully, testing each step before moving forward. Naomi moved with ease, her feet finding secure footholds, and she gestured for Samuel to follow a slightly safer path. The coordination between them had become instinctive, a dance of trust and understanding. Suddenly, the sound of rocks shifting reached their ears. Samuel froze, scanning the canyon for the source. Naomi crouched low, her body tense, ready to react. A small landslide had occurred nearby, sending a cascade of stones tumbling down the slope. Samuel pulled the horse back, and Naomi signaled him to wait. Together, they assessed the danger, moving cautiously to a safer section of the trail. The incident was a stark reminder of the unpredictability of the wilderness and the need for constant vigilance. As the day progressed, the sky began to darken with the approach of another storm. Samuel and Naomi quickened their pace, seeking shelter before the rain arrived. They found a rocky overhang, elevated and protected, where they could safely wait out the storm. Samuel gathered wood to reinforce a small fire, while Naomi arranged stones and moss to create a dry resting area. The first drops of rain fell, followed by heavier sheets, drumming against the rocks above. They settled under the shelter, the fire providing warmth and light. Samuel and Naomi shared their meal in silence, the sound of the storm a constant backdrop. Their companionship had grown stronger through the day's trials, through the narrow escapes, the coordination required to navigate dangerous terrain, and the shared understanding of the land's power. Words were no longer necessary to convey trust. Each action, each glance spoke volumes. The storm continued into the night, the wind howling through the canyon and rain cascading down in sheets. Samuel and Naomi remained vigilant, taking turns keeping watch. When Samuel observed a sudden movement near the edge of the clearing, he alerted Naomi with a subtle gesture. Together, they assessed the situation, realizing that it was only a small animal seeking shelter. Even such minor events reinforced the lessons of the day. Attention to detail, patience, and calm reactions were essential for survival. By the time the storm subsided, the canyon had transformed. The air smelled of wet earth, and small streams of water flowed along the paths they had traversed earlier. The world felt renewed, vibrant, and alive. Samuel and Naomi emerged from their shelter, careful not to slip on the wet rocks. Their journey continued, each step a testament to the resilience and trust they had cultivated together. As night approached, they found a safe spot near a calm stretch of the creek to set up a temporary camp. Samuel built a small fire, ensuring it was contained and safe, while Naomi arranged their resting area. They ate another modest meal, the quiet comfort of the fire offering a sense of security after a day filled with challenges. They spoke briefly about the lessons learned, the importance of observation, teamwork, and the trust that had grown between them. Before sleep, they took turns keeping watch, listening to the soft sounds of the canyon at night. The stars stretched across the sky, bright and endless, reflecting the vastness of the land they were navigating. Samuel realized how much he had come to rely on Naomi's instincts, and Naomi recognized Samuel's calm strength in the face of danger. Their partnership had evolved beyond survival. It had become a quiet companionship, a connection built on respect, trust, and shared experience. By the time they finally rested, a sense of calm had settled over them. The trials of the day, the narrow canyon, the landslide, the storm, had tested their skills, patience, and coordination, but they had faced each challenge together. The bond they shared was no longer fragile. It was a steady, unspoken promise of support and understanding. The wilderness had demanded their full attention, yet it had also given them a rare gift, a partnership forged in the fire of shared experience and silent trust. As they drifted into sleep, the canyon around them quieted, leaving only the gentle sound of flowing water and the whisper of the wind through the rocks. Samuel and Nayeli knew that more challenges lay ahead, but they also knew that they no longer faced the wilderness alone. Together they had become stronger, more alert and more resilient. The trust and respect that had grown between them would guide them through whatever lay ahead, and the lessons of the day would remain with them long after the storm had passed. The morning sun rose slowly over the rugged landscape, painting the horizon with soft hues of gold and orange. Samuel and Nayeli awoke to the gentle sound of birdsong and the quiet rush of a nearby stream. The air was fresh and cool, carrying the scent of wet earth from the storms of the past days. For a moment, they simply sat in silence, taking in the beauty of the wilderness around them. After so many days of travel and challenge, there was a sense of calm, a quiet satisfaction that they had survived together and grown stronger in the process. They began their morning routine with practiced efficiency. Samuel checked the saddlebags, ensuring that provisions and water were secure, while Nayeli inspected the horses and the surrounding terrain. Each movement was careful and deliberate, a reflection of the lessons learned during their journey. They had faced storms, treacherous paths, wild animals, and strangers with uncertain intentions, yet each challenge had only strengthened their trust and partnership. The bond between them was no longer tentative. It had become a steady, reliable connection built on respect, understanding, and shared experience. As they continued along the trail, the terrain began to change once again. The narrow canyons and rocky hills gave way to rolling plains dotted with clusters of scrub and low trees. Samuel guided his horse steadily, while Nayeli moved ahead, scanning the horizon and identifying potential hazards. Their coordination was seamless. A subtle gesture, a glance, or a shift in body position was enough to communicate critical information. They no longer needed words to navigate the land. Their actions had become a language of their own. Around midday, they encountered a small, abandoned cabin tucked into a grove of trees. The structure was weathered, its roof sagging and walls worn by years of exposure to the elements. Samuel approached cautiously, inspecting the area for any signs of recent activity. Nayeli remained alert, her senses attuned to the smallest sounds and movements. They found the cabin empty, but it offered shelter and a chance to rest. Together, they cleared a small area, using what materials remained to make the space safe and comfortable for a short stay. Inside the cabin, they shared a simple meal. Samuel handed Nayeli a piece of bread, and she offered him a handful of dried fruit. They spoke quietly, exchanging stories of the past, Samuel of his life as a rancher, the lessons learned from tending cattle and surviving the harsh land, Nayeli of her people, the traditions passed down through generations, and the deep understanding of the wilderness that guided her every step. Though their lives had been vastly different, they recognized common qualities in each other: resilience, patience, and a deep respect for the world around them. After their brief rest, they continued their journey, moving across the plains with the wind at their backs. The sun was high, casting long shadows across the terrain and highlighting the subtle colors of the land. Samuel noticed how easily Nayeli adapted to the changing environment, her movements fluid and precise, as if she were part of the land itself. He admired her confidence and skill, realizing that her presence had taught him much about patience, observation, and the importance of moving with purpose rather than haste. As the afternoon progressed, the sky began to darken, clouds gathering on the horizon once again. Samuel sensed the change in the air, and Nayeli's keen eyes immediately recognized the signs of an approaching storm. Without speaking, they adjusted their pace, seeking higher ground and safer footing. The land ahead was uneven, with patches of loose soil and hidden dips, but their coordination allowed them to move efficiently and safely. Each step was measured, each gesture meaningful, as they relied on the trust and understanding developed over days of shared experience. Soon, the first drops of rain began to fall, and they quickened their pace toward a small ridge that offered natural shelter. Samuel helped guide the horse over slippery stones, while Naomi pointed out the safest route, moving with an ease born of experience. They reached the ridge just as the rain intensified, setting up a small fire and preparing a modest camp. The storm raged around them, yet they were protected, their partnership allowing them to face the elements with confidence and calm. During the storm, they reflected on the journey that had brought them together. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and danger, yet each trial had revealed their strengths and deepened their connection. Samuel had learned to rely not only on his physical skills, but also on patience, observation, and trust. Naomi had discovered the value of teamwork, communication, and mutual respect in a world that often demanded self-reliance. Together, they had become more than individuals struggling to survive. They had become partners, a team capable of facing whatever challenges the wilderness might present. As the rain subsided and the sun broke through the clouds, the land around them glistened with renewed life. Small streams reflected the light, and the scent of wet earth and plants filled the air. Samuel and Naomi emerged from their shelter, careful not to slip on the damp ground, and continued their journey across the plains. The land, which had once seemed harsh and unforgiving, now appeared alive and vibrant, a reflection of the growth and understanding they had gained through their shared experiences. By late afternoon, they reached the edge of a wide valley, the view stretching out for miles with distant mountains framing the horizon. Samuel paused to admire the landscape, and Naomi did the same, her eyes reflecting a mixture of awe and appreciation. They found a quiet spot near a cluster of trees to set up camp for the night, their movements synchronized and efficient. Samuel gathered wood for the fire, while Naomi arranged stones and brush to create a safe and comfortable area. Once the fire was lit, its warm glow illuminated their faces, revealing expressions of quiet contentment. As they ate their simple meal, they shared stories and reflections from the journey. Naomi spoke of the lessons she had learned from Samuel, the value of careful observation, patience, and trust in others. Samuel shared the insights gained from Naomi, respect for the land, attention to subtle signs, and the understanding that survival often depended on cooperation and shared effort. Their conversation was calm and thoughtful, a reflection of the deep bond that had developed between them. Night fell, and the stars emerged, brilliant and clear in the vast desert sky. Samuel and Naomi took turns keeping watch, listening to the gentle sounds of the wilderness. The fire crackled softly, providing warmth and light, while the air carried the scent of the earth and nearby vegetation. They spoke little, for words were no longer necessary to convey trust and understanding. Each action, each glance, was enough to communicate their connection and ensure their safety. Before sleep, Samuel and Naomi walked to the edge of the valley, looking out over the landscape that had tested them so profoundly. Naomi spoke softly, her voice carrying a hint of emotion. "I will remember this journey," she said. Samuel nodded, understanding the depth of her words. They had shared more than survival. They had shared lessons, trust, and a rare companionship that neither had anticipated when they first met. As they returned to the fire and prepared for the night, Samuel felt a deep sense of gratitude. Naomi's presence had taught him humility, patience, and the value of partnership. Naomi, in turn, felt respect and admiration for Samuel's courage, calmness, and reliability. The bond they had formed was not fleeting. It was a lasting connection, forged through shared challenges, mutual respect, and the quiet understanding that they could rely on each other completely. The night was calm, and sleep came easily after the long day. Samuel and Naeli rested near the fire, the soft glow providing comfort and security. Outside, the wilderness was alive with subtle sounds, the rustle of small animals, the whisper of wind through trees, and the distant call of an owl. They slept peacefully, knowing that they had faced the trials of the frontier together and emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected than before. The following morning brought the final leg of their journey. The land ahead was still rugged and unpredictable, but Samuel and Naeli were prepared. Their movements were confident and coordinated, their understanding of one another guiding each step. They navigated rocky inclines, shallow streams, and patches of scrub with ease, their silent communication ensuring that each obstacle was met safely and efficiently. As they reached the top of a small hill, the valley stretched out below them, wide and open, with a river glinting in the sunlight. They paused to take in the view, the culmination of their journey together. Samuel turned to Naeli, and for the first time they shared a long, meaningful glance. Words were unnecessary. The depth of their connection was clear in that silent acknowledgement. They had faced fear, danger, and the unknown, yet they had done so together, relying on trust, respect, and shared understanding. Their final steps down the hill were slow, deliberate, and filled with quiet reflection. Each was aware of the journey behind them, the storms weathered, the dangers avoided, and the lessons learned. The wilderness had tested them, but it had also revealed the strength, resilience, and compassion that existed within each of them. By the time they reached the river, they were no longer just individuals traveling together. They were companions, allies, and friends bound by the experiences they had shared. As they prepared to continue beyond the valley, Samuel and Naeli paused once more. Naeli spoke softly, "Thank you, Samuel, for walking with me." Samuel nodded, his eyes reflecting gratitude and respect. "And thank you, Naeli, for guiding me," he replied. They smiled, a shared recognition of the journey that had changed them both, marking the end of this chapter and the beginning of a new understanding of life, trust, and companionship. The sun began to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the valley. Samuel and Naeli mounted their horses, ready to continue their journey into the wider world. Behind them, the land was quiet, bearing the marks of storms and challenges, but also the memory of their passage. Their journey had not only tested their strength and skills, but had also shown them the value of trust, patience, and shared experience. As they rode forward together, the wilderness around them seemed less daunting, and the bond they shared promised to endure far beyond the trails they had traveled.